In early 1942, the Japanese began fielding a new, highly agile fighter in combat over the Pacific. The only liquid-cooled V-12-engined fighter in Japan's inventory, and strikingly similar in appearance to European designs of the time. The Allies originally believed the aircraft was a modified Messerschmitt Bf 109, or perhaps an Italian Mocchi C202, or a Heinkel 100. In reality, it was the Kawasaki Ki-61 Hien, a design that would eventually yield the Ki 100, a conversion that replaced its inline engine with a radial, which became one of Japan's most capable late-war interceptors. Despite this lineage, the Ki-61 stood alone in the Japanese arsenal, being the only mass-produced fighter with a German-style liquid-cooled engine. Today, we take a look at what the Allies believed to be Japan's German fighter aircraft, the Ki-61. The story of this unusual aircraft dates back to 1939, during the Sino-Japanese conflict. Foreseeing a future war with advanced Western air forces, the Imperial Japanese Army Aviation Bureau issued a request for two new fighter designs, a heavy interceptor and a lighter general-purpose fighter. The interceptor was to be fast, well-armed, including cannons, and capable of climbing quickly to engage enemy bombers. Japanese fighter design doctrine at the time favored light, maneuverable aircraft with radial engines, optimized for low to medium altitude performance. To meet the new specifications, however, the Army licensed the Daimler-Benz DB601 inverted V12 engine from Germany, iconic for powering the Bf 109. Kawasaki was tasked with producing the Japanese version, designated Ha-40 or Ha-Yonju. The Ha-40, based on the DB601A, developed around 1,175 to 1,200 horsepower and was about 30 kilograms lighter than the original. It closely replicated the DB601's performance, though Japanese industry later struggled with reliability due to material shortages and quality control issues. Kawasaki received contracts for two aircraft, the Ki-60, a heavy interceptor, and the Ki-61, a lighter air superiority fighter. Development of the Ki-60 began in February 1940, and by March 1941, its first prototype was complete. This initial prototype was heavily armed with two 12.7mm Ho 103 machine guns mounted in the fuselage and two German-made Mauser MG 151/2020mm cannons installed in the wings. However, due to performance issues identified during testing, such as high wing loading and inadequate speed, the second and third prototypes underwent modifications. These included replacing the wing-mounted MG cannons with additional Ho 103 machine guns to reduce weight, resulting in a total of four 12.7mm Ho 103 machine guns. Despite these changes, the aircraft's performance remained unsatisfactory, leading to the program's cancellation in favor of the more promising Ki-61 design. Ki-60 flight tests in mid-1941 fell short of expectations. The first prototype had an excessively high stalling speed, necessitating long takeoff runs, heavy controls, and only managed about 560 kilometers per hour, 348 miles per hour, in top speed, failing to meet the 600 kilometer per hour design goal. Its maneuverability was poor by Japanese standards. Two further prototypes were built and tweaked, but improvements were marginal. By late 1941, the Army had started favoring Nakajima's Ki-44 Shoki as their dedicated interceptor, and the Ki-60 program was terminated by the end of 1941. In the meantime, seeing the Ki-60's limitations, Kawasaki's design team had already shifted focus back to the Ki-61 project during 1941. The Ki-61 was conceived as the polar opposite of the Ki-60, despite using the same DB601-derived engine. It was intended as a lighter, more agile fighter, optimized for low to medium altitude air superiority, with a modest armament and fine handling characteristics. Pilot ergonomics and maneuverability were the priority. On paper, the Ki-61's layout resembled contemporary European fighters like the Bf 109 or Heinkel He 100. Building on lessons from the Ki-60, the Ki-61 design featured refined aerodynamics and controls, larger wings for lower wing loading, and a slimmer fuselage. It also incorporated protection and fuel capacity novel for Japanese fighters. Each wing housed a 190-litre semi-self-sealing fuel tank, and a 165-litre self-sealing tank sat behind the cockpit. Arming the Ki-61 initially were two synchronized 12.7mm HO-103 machine guns in the cowl. This weapon was lightweight, about 23 kilograms, and had a high rate of fire. Each gun carried 250 rounds. For early prototypes, two additional guns, either 7.7 or 12.7mm, could be mounted in the wings, but the Army viewed the Ki-61 as sufficiently armed with just the twin heavy machine guns to save weight. Despite these weight-saving measures, the Ki-61 still ended up with a wing loading of around 146 kilograms per square meter, much higher than the ultralight Ki-43's 93 kilograms per square meter. This heavier wing loading was unprecedented in Japanese service at the time, signaling a move toward higher speed performance at some cost to low-speed agility. The first prototype flew in December 1941. Test pilots appreciated its solid construction, good diving characteristics, and improved survivability compared to the A6M0. Inspired by German designs like the 109, the Ki-61 would differ greatly from the Zero in principle. While the Zero excelled in low-speed agility, it suffered from fuel tank vulnerability, control stiffening in dives, and negative G engine cutouts. The Ki-61, with its fuel-injected engine, stronger frame and protective tanks, overcame many of these issues. In early 1942, Kawasaki staged a fly-off between two pre-production Ki-61s and other fighters. A Bf-109E7, a Lag-3, a P-40E, a Ki-43 prototype, and a Ki-44. The Ki-61 was the fastest aircraft tested and second only to the Ki-43 in maneuverability. The results persuaded the Army to adopt it. Production began shortly after, and the Ki-61-1, the Army Type 3 Fighter Model No. 1, entered frontline service by late 1942. The Ki-61 first saw action during the April 18, 1942 Doolittle Raid, when a prototype was scrambled and misidentified by US crews as a Bf-109. By early 1943, the 68th Sentai deployed to Wewak, New Guinea, followed by the 78th Sentai at Rabaul. These early deployments saw high non-combat losses due to tropical conditions, engine failures, and maintenance issues. Despite these setbacks, the Ki-61 proved formidable in combat. American P-40E pilots, used to fighting the nimble but slower Japanese Zero, had developed tactics to exploit the Zero's weaknesses. Standard practice was to stay fast, prioritize the dive, and never enter a turn fight which would result in lower speeds. Against the Ki-61, these tactics were less effective. The Ki-61 could dive better, climb comparably, and withstand more damage. And unlike other Japanese designs, the Ki-61 rarely caught fire from fuel tank punctures in combat. General George Kenney requested more P-38s, which were believed to be better matched to the Ki-61's performance. The aircraft earned the Allied reporting name Mike, later changed to Tony, due to its resemblance to Italian fighters like the Mocky C-202. Tony remained its code name through the end of the war. A higher performance variant, the Ki-61-2, was introduced with the HA-140 engine and a larger wing. Though theoretically capable of 1,500 horsepower, the HA-140 was plagued with reliability problems. When the engine factory was bombed in January 1945, 275 Ki-61-2 airframes were converted to use the Mitsubishi HA-112 radial engine. This emergency conversion became the Ki-100, one of Japan's most successful late-war fighters. As the war progressed, Ki-61s were increasingly tasked with intercepting B-29s over Japan. Heavier armament was added, including 20 and 30 mm cannons, but the added weight degraded performance. Some pilots were ordered to conduct ramming attacks when conventional methods failed. While advanced at its debut, the Ki-61's design struggled to keep pace with late-war developments. The engine proved to be arguably the biggest problem area. In the short term, its DB601A-based engine was a fine power plant for a 1939-era fighter. But 2 to 3 years into the Pacific War, the next generation of fighters emerged. New Allied types with 1,500 to 2,000 horsepower radial engines, such as the F6F Hellcat, F4U Corsair, P-47 Thunderbolt, and later P-51 Mustang with a Merlin inline, now outclassed the Ki-61 in the very attributes that had been its strengths: speed, climb, and high-altitude performance. The Ki-61-1's 1,150 horsepower engine left it underpowered in 1944 when facing these opponents. Moreover, from the outset, Japanese manufacturers struggled to mass-produce the Ha-40 engine with consistent quality. The DB601 was a complex high-performance engine requiring precision machining. Kawasaki's version was lighter by about 30 kilograms and thus even less tolerant of production flaws. Achieving the necessary precision proved difficult, especially as war shortages of high-grade materials, lubricants, and high-octane fuel worsened. In frontline service, the Ha-40 became notoriously finicky. German Bf-109 units had their share of engine issues, but Japan's industry, under intense resource strain and bombing, could not provide the same level of support or incremental improvements that Germany managed for the 109. Operating the Ki-61 in the tropical Pacific environment further exposed its weaknesses. High temperatures, humidity, and corrosive salt air all affected the engine's performance and reliability. Fuel feed and cooling issues cropped up in hot weather, for instance vapor lock or fuel pump failures. Maintenance was also hampered by the Ki-61's design. Unlike radial engine planes, the Hien's engine cowling side panels were fixed as part of the load-bearing structure. Mechanics could only remove the top and bottom cowling panels, making engine access laborious. This slowed down repairs and made routine servicing in the field a challenge. Finally, ground crews were unfamiliar with inline engines. The Imperial Japanese Army Air Force had trained its support crews on simple radials. The liquid-cooled inverted V was a new beast. Lacking expertise and spare parts, frontline units often had to ship engines back to a depot in the home islands or to a major base, e.g. Halmahera in the East Indies, for overhaul. This logistical delay meant many damaged aircraft sat idle awaiting engines. Beyond the engine troubles, the Ki-61's performance ceiling became a liability by late war. Its single-stage supercharger meant it could not reach the high altitudes easily where B-29s cruised, about 30,000 feet. Newer Japanese fighters like Nakajima's Ki-84 Hayate and Kawanishi's N1KJ Shiden had more powerful engines and could attain better speed and climb at medium altitudes, though even those struggled against B-29s without turbochargers. The Ki-61 had been designed as a light interceptor with a pair of 12.7mm guns. But as Army directives demanded heavier armament to destroy tough American bombers, weight and drag crept up. When later Ki-61 variants were equipped with four 12.7mm guns or two 20mm cannon, the added weight significantly degraded the Hien's climb and maneuverability. An ironic consequence was that a fully armed Ki-61 carrying the extra cannons often couldn't catch the B-29s it was meant to intercept. Some units resorted to removing certain guns or armor to lighten the aircraft for high-altitude intercepts, or ultimately relying on ramming tactics. A final issue was the Ki-61's operational longevity. The design was difficult to keep airworthy over long periods, and it proved quite dangerous, even in non-combat situations. Many Ki-61s were destroyed in accidents, ground mishaps, or by Allied air raids before ever engaging the enemy. In fact, it has been said that more Ki-61s were lost on the ground than in aerial combat. In warm summer months, Ki-61 engines were notoriously prone to overheating or even seizing while idling on the ground. Oil circulation and cooling were marginal at low RPM. Late war manufacturing woes compounded the problem. By 1944 and into 45, shortages led to imperfectly machined engine parts, such as bearings, causing increased failure rates. All of this was exacerbated by a crippling lack of spare parts and the bombing of manufacturing plants. Notably, the January 1945 destruction of an engine factory ended engine production entirely. Once an aircraft became unserviceable, it was often cannibalized for parts to keep others flying, leading to a slow attrition of the fleet. In the end, this series of issues negated much of the Ki-61's theoretical effectiveness. On paper, the Heyern was a sound design based on a combat-proven German fighter concept, the Bf-109 lineage, that had excelled since 1937. In practice, however, the Ki-61 suffered from being engineered to fine tolerances that Japan's industry and field conditions couldn't sustain. Over-engineering the engine installation, such as the fixed engine bearer cowling, made it less adaptable to frontline maintenance. The Germans, even under late war stress, not only sustained the Bf-109 design, but actually improved it dramatically. The final Bf-109K4 variant, fielded in late 1944, could match or exceed the performance of most late war Allied piston engine fighters, over 700 kilometers per hour speed, excellent climb. It retained the same basic airframe that had been flying since 1939, but with a series of engine upgrades and aerodynamic tweaks. In comparison, the Ki-61 did not enjoy a comparable evolution. Why the Hien could not achieve a similar progression is multifaceted. Certainly, Japan's beleaguered industrial base, lack of a reliable higher-powered engine, and the intense pressure of strategic bombing played major roles. Much like the famed Zero fighter, the Ki-61's initial design choices, emphasizing a compact airframe and a tightly cowled engine, limited the scope for upgrades. When the time came to fit a significantly more powerful engine, the He 140, the program faltered and had to be abandoned. The Ki-61 gave way to the Ki 100, which was more reliable and effective at medium altitudes. The Ki 100 was competitive with late-war Allied fighters and surprised many Allied pilots with its agility and performance. As for the Ki-61 Hien itself, the sleek European-looking inline engine fighter, it ultimately met the same fate as the Zero. Its design proved difficult to upgrade substantially, and it became outclassed by newer models. Yet, the Ki-61 fought on against the odds until the end of the Pacific War. With around 2,700 to 2,800 units produced, it served in a wide variety of roles, from interceptor to escort to kamikaze mount. In an air force dominated by radial-engined planes, the Ki-61 stood out as a uniquely German-inspired design. Thanks for watching. Our videos are researched, written and produced by a small team of filmmakers dedicated to bringing you accurate military aviation history from around the world. Please consider supporting us by joining our merch and members site for early access, bonus content and merch discounts. Or become a YouTube channel member for early access, or simply hit subscribe. Your support means everything.